What should this podcast be called? What are we calling this thing?
Oh, shit.
Throw your hands up if you with it. Drop it.
Welcome to this as yet unnamed experimental show, podcast. God help me. What am I doing here? I'm Chris Best, co-founder of Substack, the company. I'm here today with Mills Baker. Mills is the famous author of The Meta is Murder Tumblr, storied internet poster, has worked at Quora, the Home Depot, Facebook, a veterinary hospital, and now runs design and propaganda here at Substack. Thank you for being my guinea pig, Mouse.
My pleasure. I just realized yesterday when they mentioned that this was going to be a guinea pig run, this is my second podcast guinea pig run with one of y'all, because I was the first guy on Active Voice before it went
awesome.
into the wild. Yeah,
that was maybe the best episode.
It was certainly one of the least consequential episodes.
They were all pretty good, actually. All right, I have things prepared. I have questions. I have topics.
That's right.
But first, you are a Substack celebrity. I don't know if you know this. People are dying to know who you are. Where did you grow up? How did you come to be sitting here as one of the most famous people on Substack Notes?
Well, that's luck. I mean, I can answer a lot of those questions. It was all luck. I was lucky to be born in New Orleans, which is a wonderful city that I think put me on a certain kind of weirdo trajectory that I didn't necessarily realize was that weird until much later. I fortunately came across an early internet guy who evangelized the web to us, our little class in 1996.
Which guy was
that?
His name
Jonah Peretti. Peretti, who went on to found Huffington Post and BuzzFeed. But at the time, Jonah was like kind of one of these, I think this happens to a lot of people. He was a sensitive, intellectual, somewhat driven guy with a lot of big ideas, and he had no idea how to connect them to the world. And so at the time he was trying teaching, which scales to a certain degree. He reached 30 of us, I think maybe, 20 of us had our lives completely transformed. And I think he then wanted to do that at a larger scale. And it was a wonderful time to know him. He was sort of probably like knowing y'all before you found a company. It's like all ideas. You know what I mean? Everything's yes. He was extremely enthusiastic about the web. He thought it would destroy Apple. We used to argue quite a bit at my high school about what was going to happen to Apple. I was a big Apple fanboy, and I would always tell him, no, the user experience focus is going to win in the long run. You're an idiot, and his 17-year-old moron telling this to a grown man, but he was very polite about it. And we had a little bet. He at one point told the class, he said, I'm going to buy a couple of shares of a publicly traded company, buy a little stock, and I'd love to know what you all think I should buy. And I said, you're an idiot if you don't buy Apple. User experience wins, user interface, you know how designers are. We always believe it's really going to matter someday. And this was before Jobs came back, or right around maybe when Jobs was back as interim CEO. And Jonah said no. Instead, he bought LA Gear stock. LA Gear, which was the old, the tennis shoe company. And so every time I talk to Jonah over the next 20 years, I say, how's the LA Gear doing? And, Apple, split 100 times since then or whatever, but it took several more years. So that's how I got into computers. And then I bounced around, came out to California after meeting my wife on Tumblr. And then I met you after I was working at Quora. And then I came to Substack.
Amazing. I don't have any good follow-ups for that. That's an amazing. I'm just going to let the mills shine.
I think this is what's going on with me and David. David and I want to do a podcast all the time. And, it's like I work at Substack and we worked at Quora. Like we're big posters. But something about, I think it's the hosting issue, and he and I have talked explicitly. Chris, we ought to save this for a product idea. Maybe if AI can do anything, if we could get good AI hosts, I think a lot of people love to be interviewed. They love to talk about the things that they're excited about. But it's really, hosting is like a weird mode,
All right. Well, that's actually a really good segue into the next thing that I had, which is, all right, I don't actually know if this is going to be possible for us to do. We're going to edit this in after, but I want us to watch this video together from the OpenAI.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey, Rocky. I'm doing great. How about you?
I'm awesome. Listen, I got some huge news.
Oh, do tell. I'm all ears.
Well, in a few minutes, I'm going to be interviewing at OpenAI. Have you heard of them?
OpenAI? Huh? Sounds vaguely familiar. Kidding, of course. That's incredible, Rocky. What kind of interview?
Well, it's for a software engineering role, but I just need to know, do I look presentable, professional?
Well, Rocky, You definitely have the I've been coding all night look down, which could actually work in your favor. Maybe just run a hand through your hair or lean into the mad genius vibe. Your enthusiasm is what's really going to shine through.
I don't have a lot of time, so I'm just going to throw this on. What do you think?
Oh, Rocky, that's quite a statement piece. I mean, you'll definitely stand out. Though maybe not in the way you're hoping for an interview.
Okay, I got it.
Thing. So what do you think? Is AI ready to host our podcast?
Well, no, because nobody likes that. You know what I mean? There's this horrible problem with this stuff where, like, I'm amazed at how the latency is so low. She sounds emotional and great, but it's like, I don't know what the issue is. And maybe, this could be generational. By the way, do you know I know that guy? I worked with that guy at Facebook. It's crazy to see Rocky in this capacity as like one of to repeat a theme, a guinea pig for a flirty interaction with digital software. Really, I found it bizarre. Let me ask you this. So we can talk about her. What did you think about Rocky's vibe? Like, does he seem, for example, at the end, he laughs and he says, okay, I get it. Sheepishly, he takes the hat off and he's moving on. Rocky's acting, right?
Yeah, I think they both had a weird, fake, scripted vibe in this. They're both firmly in the uncanny valley.
Yeah, that's a dark possibility that when you interact with something in the uncanny valley, it's actually contagious, and you just lower your level of human permanent reality or presence until you're like kind of conforming to what she's doing. That's dark. But it did seem that way. It's like Rocky the whole time seemed like he was kind of behind himself, waiting for the thing to do a thing, and then when he'd recognize the thing, he'd do a thing that is an appropriate response to that thing,
But this is you're touching on what you know is my very favorite anti-AI take, which is that everybody complains about things in AI that prove the AI will never be like a human, and then the thing they complain about is 100% a thing that humans do, and acting a little bit robotic.
What we only do. Yeah. It's
so like
that's an especially stark example, though. That was brutal. Like, almost the second I finished saying it, I was like, wait, I think I'm doing this in like at least 60% of my interactions each day.
It's literally happening to me right now. I'm like, I switch on the podcast hosting mode, and I'm like, oh God. I feel like I'm wearing that fucking hat. You're a hat enthusiast. You wear hats at work. Why does that hat not work? I think it was
Rocky's hat? Okay, I think there's a specific cultural reason. I think this is like a good example of how memes aren't even necessary. You don't even have to know what a meme comes from. There's a movie, Caddyshack, where Bill Murray plays an insane groundskeeper, and he wears a hat like that. And I swear to God, ever since Caddyshack, wearing a hat like that in an inappropriate context has become shorthand for being deranged. And so I feel like I've seen it in movies like The Younger Brother shows up with that, and everybody just goes, oh, he's fucking crazy. And fishing gear in general does send a certain message of like, it's like I should be on a boat. So if I'm wearing that here, it's like I'm deliberately a guy who wears inappropriate stuff, maybe that's it. But Rocky also does, he did look tired. I hope that wasn't before his real interview,
Maybe I could have picked one of the more favorable ones. What do you make of the GPT-4o, the weird crooning, the real-time interaction? Where are you at with it?
Well, so that's I had not seen that video before. I watched the one of the tutoring. Maybe this is a bit selective, but I'm so excited about that possibility for Kizzy. Because all she wants to do is challenge and ask questions, and often questions I don't have an answer to. And I think in general, most of those processes, it's more important that she has flow. As you can imagine, I hate all of these technologies from the point of view of the truth, right? Because none of them give a shit about the truth. That's not what's going on. So you can imagine one of my potential reactions would be, it's bad for Kizzy to learn from an LLM because I'm so anxious about what I consider to be the truth status of different theories and ideas. And they're just going to say whatever the fuck shit they hoover up and their operators decide to lean them towards, and I don't like any of that. But I actually think the process of continual investigation and question and answering is so valuable that I was really excited about that tutor video. And then I haven't watched any more. That's the first one I've seen like that. I've read people talking about it, and I didn't really care for it. It's infantilizing. When it's just like, you see people get angry at friendly copy. I'm sure, you talk a lot about watching users use your tools. One of the lowest points a designer has is they write what feels like friendly copy, and somebody uses it and they feel condescended to, and they're like, don't talk to me like I'm a child. And you're like, God damn it, I'm just trying to I feel like because I know she's created to be this way, that basically the vibe I have is there's some dude in the mission who thinks I want to be talked to this way. I don't like that. It's fucking Sama. You know what I mean? It's like Sam Altman thinks this is what I want. I don't like that part of it at all.
I think the kid thing is such a great point. I bought, that, what do you call it? The rabbit, that like one of these crazy AI hardware things. It was like an impulse buy. Basically, because the hardware looked cute and it's got a little rabbit on it. And the thing is totally useless, unfortunately. And it's almost, it's like it doesn't even work at basic things that it's supposed to do. I still love it though. It's still like a cute little thing. And you know what? I gave it to my kids and they were all over it. They were like, oh, I pressed the button and I like jibber jabber at it and it jibber jabbers back and it says some useless inane thing sometimes and the little rabbit bounces. Like, this is actually great. This is wonderful. I do think that's going to be a big use case of these things is just like infinitely patient, fun things for kids to talk to and play around with. And you could probably predict my answer to your critique of like, oh, it sometimes doesn't care about the truth and just jabbers on about whatever it was sort of like programmed to do via its background. Yeah, that's why it'll never be as good as a human who would never suffer a flaw.
Well, I don't think. But this is my main gripe with humans. And honestly, actually, it's funny. I'm sure you have somebody like this. I imagine David sitting on my shoulder whenever I make some kind of claim, and I imagine what he would say. He would immediately dispute what I was about to say. I was about to say, truth-seeking, truth status, caring about the truth status of things is very important for humans. And David would say, you don't believe that at all. You're actually completely opposed. You constantly push back, and that's true. So no, you're right. Not only do humans do that, but I don't even think it's necessarily a problem. I suppose what it is that you like to have a rough model of what the source of the jibber jabber going into your children is going to be. So like if like I leave Kizzy in your place for a while, you're going to fill her with a bunch of crazy Canadian stuff. But I'm okay with that. I know Canada a little bit. I'm okay with that. But like I don't know what the hell those people in the mission are going to do. They've got all kinds of ideas. And everybody does, and I do too. There are a lot of people who wouldn't want me programming the LLM talking to their kids, ruining firefighters for them.
Okay, well, so I'm going to use this opportunity to pin you down on a thing that I've been wondering about. And now I get to ask you in podcast form, which means legally you have to answer, which is...
Yeah, I have to try seriously.
What is your take on AI? Where do you think this is going? Is this a big deal? I see you kind of like letting the air out of things, ribbing it, making fun of it, doubting the biggest versions of the hype. But I also think you're a deep thinker about technology, about where these things are going. Where's Mills at?
Okay, this is my actual opinion, and it's not. I think it'll probably disappoint almost every constituency. I think AI is going to be just like the web and the internet. If you go back to 1996 and you read Nicholas Negroponte in Wired, he's like, "Listen, man, once this internet gets out there, that's the end of poverty. That's the end of suffering. We're all going to share a global awareness. We're going to vibrate and meditate together on a dimension." This guy's an MIT professor. I'm going, oh my God, I'm 5 years away from the world being transformed. The world was transformed. The web is everywhere. It somehow seems to have meant more of the world. I don't know exactly where the stumble was. I don't even know if there was a stumble, but like the internet is just more of the world, which is great. I like the world, so I'm like down for this. I'm a fan of the internet. My whole life flows from it. But I think it disappoints the most profound visions. So to be concrete, I don't think we're getting AGI on the basis of this trajectory. We could get AGI tomorrow because of a discovery in a lab doing things that I don't know about. Adam used to bust up my AGI chops by saying, okay, dickhead, well, if it's never going to happen on a von Neumann thing or whatever the fuck, how about do you think we'll ever be able to grow brains? Brains grow in bodies. We're getting close with this and that. Do you think we can grow a brain? And if we can grow a brain, do you think we can supercharge its inputs and outputs or supercharge its operation in some way. That's a little, so I would never rule out AGI. I'm not a true dualist. I often joke that I'm a crypto dualist because I'm effectively a dualist and I am a supernaturalist. But for the purposes of this debate, I don't use any of that shit. I just say, I don't think LLMs are a path to AGI. And I think the things that are missing are somewhat obvious, but also can be, I think you can challenge these concepts. But for example, the missing will seems like a very strange thing. Will comes so early in the evolution of life, comes far before consciousness, before I think vision. It's like the organism directing itself, having some telos towards itself that it can't even articulate, but it's constantly active and fighting for that telos. The fact that that's not present in any of these systems, and we have no idea how it could be present, I think that's people don't think that's related to cognition, and I think it is. I think there's something about cognition, time, and will that is related to the hallucinatory properties these machines have. I'm not in the field, so I couldn't do any better than that. So let me go back to specifics. No AGI from the current trajectory. Current trajectory leads to tons of awesome shit and is like really net good. Like people are going to love it. It's going to be able to do tons of cool shit for you. It's going to make products possible that nobody could have imagined. It's going to solve major social problems. As you know, I have this crazy old man take that is, if we get this stuff right, we could solve the moderation problems for everyone forever. Like you could have an agent who acts as your moderator and who really understands you conversationally, an interface anyone can use. I think that's very exciting. So I never want to sound like I think LLMs aren't the shit. I think they're the shit. They're awesome, but I just don't. I'm not sure they have anything to do with AGI.
Right. You're somebody who doesn't think, hey, if we just keep scaling these things up, they're gonna become super intelligent, take over the world. Let me try a weaker version of that story on you, because I think we're actually pretty close. I certainly agree with the second half of what you said. These things are going to be awesome. They're going to do a bunch of stuff. It's instructive to look at historical parallels like the internet or electrification or the Industrial Revolution, where it's like, people overestimate what will happen in a year, underestimate what happens in 10 and 30 years, and these things really do reshape human history. But on the AGI thing, let's grant that it's not sufficient. The thing that I would say is the thing that LLMs are doing is definitely one of the things that people do. I recognize people in these things. And this is why I get such joy out of my this critique of the critique where everyone's like, sometimes it's overconfident. And I'm like, I don't know what to tell you. Like,
God, I'd hate to see that.
I hate to see something that's just coming up with a nice sounding thing to get out of this social interaction instead of deeply reasoning from first principles. What a disaster that would be. Yeah. So my model of this is like, okay, there's some package of things that go into being a person. And the ability to understand and produce language is probably not the totality of that. I think the very strong version of like literally you are just a machine for predicting the next token is too strong.
Yeah.
But it's definitely a big part of it. And the thing that's been shifting for me is it's a bigger part of it than I might have predicted. The amount you can get from language prediction, the amount of useful stuff you can get, the amount of human-like stuff you can get is much more than I would have predicted a priori. And it makes me wonder if, to your point, okay, now that we have LLMs, you add one more thing that's like, and then we add will something. And we're like I wouldn't say that we're there. I wouldn't say that we're like, just a scaling difference away. It does feel to me like we're plausibly much closer. And that the massive momentum in the field, everybody paying attention to it, the number of people working on it and messing with it increases the surface area by which one of these breakthroughs that you described can happen. Like the chances that somebody does make a breakthrough, I think is way higher given that we have these crazy machines that are about to change everything.
Yeah, I think I agree with all of that. I think in particular, I think the familiarity of the LLM as like a, for lack of a better term, sort of a psychological dynamical system, that feeling of I am token predicting right now. It's interesting. I feel the same way. I sort of feel like I see people in them. I don't know whether that means It's interesting. This is an example of the kind of thing I would expect myself to be very bad at reasoning about because I'm the opposite of detail oriented. So I don't know how important the specific mechanism by which something works at a lower level is to whether its higher level conformity with what we need the system to do is great enough to build all the system around it. In other words, like there's a world where let's say we go forward X number of years and there's AGI. They're there. They're people. They're agents. They think and feel. We have to morally reason about them. All of that. It may be that part of it, right? Like maybe it's literally the case that, or it's the case that LLMs are like they're like those Boston Dynamics robots, which definitely walk, but they don't walk the way I walk. And if my goal were to produce a human, that's not their goal, of course. They're producing something that's functionally equivalent to a human, which is fucking awesome. I love that stuff, to be clear. It's so funny. Every time one of those videos comes out, people are all like, oh my God, it's so horrifying. And I'm like, man, all I can think of is how filthy my fucking room is and how if there were a walking machine in here, it wouldn't be that filthy. You know what I mean? I'm amazed that people aren't lazy enough. Is that the whole issue with technology and coverage in the world today? Is people aren't lazy enough anymore to be like, man, I just want to get out of doing these things.
It could be. Did you see there was that Nat Friedman, was it, tweet that was like, I want a robot instead of leaf blowers. I want a robot that quietly picks up leaves while I sleep. And people were
get like 100 million likes.
God, these tech pros are so awful. And it's like, fuck off. Like, that would obviously be awesome. It's clear that would be awesome.
Oh my God. The leaf blower situation in my neighborhood is out of control. That would be 100% of this community would be like, yes to that. You know, that's crazy, man. We don't want to eliminate leaf blower jobs. It was so funny. I was just talking to a guy about job elimination in robotics. It is something that really is on people's minds, which I think points to what you mentioned of how wide the net is now. It's a going concern as like a whole field, which I do think is probably necessary. So like I mentioned, I'm a crypto dualist. And so one open possibility I have is that none of this can do it, so it's interesting because I agree with you. This feels like it, and this could be part of doing it. And then I also have I wouldn't be stunned if Substack hits it big. We can finally afford cryonics. We both get frozen when we die. They wake us up in 2,000 years and we're like, so fucking where's the AGI? And they're like, you guys aren't going to believe this. You can't build it. It just can't be built. We still don't know why.
But you're at least agnostic about it. You're neither certain that it is impossible, nor are you certain that it'll happen on a short time frame. I think that's the only possible correct position.
I think so. Bless anybody who's got certainty about it, truly, because I'll say this, there are people who are spiritualists who have certainty about the conditions of consciousness and, the soul, for example. Even to those people, something I often want to say is, it can all change whenever, if you believe in a God, it can all change whenever he wants it to. Right? Like we keep discovering new things. Something I often used to joke with David about is if I were running a simulation, let's say, I'll put this in non-religious terms, I'll put it in sci-fi terms. If I were running a simulation, I would develop enough of the simulation so that all the people inside are satisfied. And then if I got a little dev alert that was like, hey, one of your monkeys has built a little thing of glass that lets him look so fucking far down into the shit that he's starting to see the texture patterns, I'd be like, hey, devs, figure it out. Ship a patch so there's more there that somehow fucking makes sense. And the devs are going, you fucker, we told you that if you had super big objects and super small objects, they wouldn't be able to be reconciled. And you just go, hey man, fucking figure it out. They're investigating down there. You better tie it together. That's a plausible divine story, in other words, that would still prevent you from ever being certain that AGI is not possible. In other words, all I'm saying is, if you're really epistemically realistic, you've got to be somewhat open about this, especially what you mentioned earlier, just the rate of progress. A bunch of this shit you could have humiliated me about because 10 years ago, I didn't think any of this was possible. Any of this. I definitely didn't think they could do what they're doing. And I have to be real about what that means for my beliefs.
I think that's right. I think that's how everybody is almost all of the time. And being able to just recognize that actually puts you in the big brain contingent. Well, let me switch gears.
It makes it more fun.
It is. You're like,
because now you're just an observer. Yeah, you're like, what's? Yeah, one day they could say, "Hey, we got AGI," and I go, "Oh my God, thank God I didn't stake my reputation on that."
Well, let me talk to you about my big picture, firmly held theories of the future, and give you a chance to poke holes in them. And I think this ties a little bit to something we talked about earlier. You were sort of, I think, gesturing at this of, hey, we've got this machine that's talking to my daughter. what's its deal? Who is it representing? Where's it getting its ideas, its values? How do I know I can trust that thing? That feels to me like actually quite a deep question, and relates to how I think about what we're up to at Substack and sort of my theory of some of where some of the stuff is
Yeah.
going. I gave this talk at All Hands of the Day. You may remember. I'll kind of recap it here. That I'd love for you to like tear it to shreds, basically. But the thesis was, okay, we as a species are learning to cope with media superabundance. We have infinite distraction available to us at all times, any on tap, whenever we want it. And technology in general, social media, smartphones, the internet, now generative AI, are all working to accelerate this trend, like drive the cost of content to zero. Legacy media is Walking Dead, and the major platforms are kind of in the zero sum war for eyeballs. Like they're, everybody's having to compete for like the same human attention that is now sort of like maximally used. And that's causing them to sort of carcinize into the same kind of thing, these like quick video, hit video, lowest common denominator things. And that's sort of like creating this giant magnetic pull towards a future where people are using media more and more like an addictive drug. It's kind of like it's getting ever more compelling. You're chasing how it feels in the moment to use it more and more. It's kind of like, eroding your attention span, eroding your will. You're choosing it at every step, right? You're choosing to hit your TikTok the same way you might hit the vape or hit the slot machine. But in some way, it's still bad, basically. You're giving up control of your mind to the technologists who are building it, or the advertisers who are funding it, or the governments who are controlling it at some point. None of this is new. I'm not saying any of this is like a new phenomenon. And I'm just saying that technology is accelerating it. It's kind of like making the drug more potent, like it has for literal drugs, like it has for many other things. And we have what is fundamentally like a problem of coping with excess. Everything's getting more compelling and less satisfying. And the answer to that is culture. The answer to that is us learning how to live, learning how to, like, what traditions, what rituals, what ways of being, like, how do we integrate these disruptive new technologies into humanity in a way that we're happy with? And that problem is kind of at the center of what we mean when we say culture. It's at the center of what we mean when we say sort of the discourse or the media. Like it's the job that these things should be doing outside of giving me something sort of momentarily entertaining. And the thing that we're missing, the thing that I'm excited to work on, is kind of like the business model for that second future. The drug future is well underway. Media as drug future is well underway. The media as culture future, there's a hunger for it. There's a growing, people feel this lack. They're like, hey, I'm not totally happy with all the time I'm spending on things. Doesn't mean they want things that are boring and dull, but it means there's sort of like a missing nutrition value. There's a missing sense of control and agency and human worth. And that's the thing that Substack should ultimately work on. And that's the thing that, generative AI, like all of these technologies, is going to kind of accelerate both ends of. All right.
Okay, you want me to poke holes in that?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I'm very aligned with that. Let me try to come up with some kind of a critical view of that, because I think I largely agree with that thesis. I think it's interesting because in a way, one of the properties of Substack's brand that's always surprised me is that, like, no matter what's happening with the content or the marketplace, Substack kind of retains the cachet of the rebel. And a lot of other companies that do what we do or do similar things or had similar, there's a Venn diagram and we overlap with them on some dimension, don't have that reputation. And you can tell their brand doesn't have the halo of revolution, which I think, particularly in America, is like a really, really important part of a successful brand. And what you were just saying made me think, to a certain extent, Substack's the counterculture. right? Like every time there's a new technological medium or telecommunications medium, let's say, there's a period where it's like its new rules, the rules of it, especially its business models, are kind of unopposed. Their costs are just being absorbed, not even counted. There's this whole funny thing about the internet where like you can kind of date your internet age a little bit by when you remember the first pieces showing up about, hey, maybe this isn't good. Whether it was somebody being like, hey, I think young women are getting anorexia on Instagram. Hey, I think young men are being turned into fucking maniacs on 4chan. It's like those essays, you can find essays like that from like 2002. And that's the first sign of a counterculture. People kind of going, hey, I don't like what's going on here. I think there's a problem. And I want to give it a name. We want to, we'll call it enshittification, or we'll call it social contagion. We'll call it whatever the hell. The development of a vocabulary is also part of a culture or a counterculture. And like, not to push this too much and be too nerdy about it, but you can even think of it as there's a kind of a reformation kind of quality to this of like, you could imagine Hamish nailing something to Mark Zuckerberg's door and saying, I got 95 fucking problems with ads or whatever, But there is this feeling behind the company always of that, and I wonder if what you're saying basically describes why, because it's it's not like the features we ship necessarily have these properties. It's more that like we represent like an institution scale attempt to build the counterculture and build it into the, of course you and I want to build into the dominant culture, obviously. And I think we will, but like right now and for some period of time, it's like, it is, what unites them all on Substack? It's they thought the other shit sucked. And what is the other stuff? It's the bad culture, the lack of any kind of ability to. Those are the places where people haven't figured it out. No, there's still no good norms on Twitter, for example.
We have kind of a limited view for what this thing, or our role in this thing. Like if we want to help stoke the counterculture, we're not like, oh, and I know what the counterculture is, and my version of it is like, I'm not a prophet, you're not a prophet. But there is this sense of like, whatever it is, it's going to be about returning power to the people who are part of it. Like to me, this is what culture ultimately is. It's not about getting what you want. It's about learning what to want. What people want is wildly malleable. And the process of culture is kind of the process of a multiplayer figuring out of what you value and what's going to matter and how what you're going to choose to be a part of. And there is, I think, for me at least, this really sort of Promethean ethos of like, we're just going to give power to the people who are making the thing. And some of them are going to be nuts, and some of them are going to be nuts and right, and some of them are going to be boring by my standards. And, I think this falls into the free speech stuff too. Like my view is, if I can help you make a choice about what you're reading, what you're writing, what you're being a part of, and you're making that choice as your best self, and you're thinking, hey, what do I want to invest my time and life into? And then you make a catastrophically bad choice, and it's the wrong thing, and it's terrible. Like, I'm still happy about that. I still think we've done like a fundamentally good thing in the world. And I think that is kind of radical. I don't think that's been the dominant ethos in Silicon Valley. I don't think that's been the dominant ethos in American culture for the past, maybe since the freewheeling internet 90s. I don't know.
Well, I do think there's here's a weird angle on this. What you just said made me think of like 70 things. But one of the things was a weird angle on that issue is sort of like so why it's good to let the freak of the week disgorge themselves on the internet, build up a little following. All of those people find out it's terrible. None of them can find partners, and they all have to go through various crises. They get into terrible things. Some of them do terrible things. Some of them grow past it. Some of them write a book about how I should have never done that, et cetera. So the reason that's good is that, at least the reason I would argue it's good is, I'm a falsificationist, basically. I think that people learn through testing things out and trying. I think you have to have a compassionate imagination to understand how necessary this is for people, and how often they have to learn things that you're very sure they shouldn't need to learn, that they should be able to just hear and read. And that's fine. From my point of view, almost everything that everyone on earth does is dumb. But that's not actually an important point of view. You know what I mean? Everybody's learning the things that they need to learn and going the place they need to go. Part of why I can say that is that I'm a very, truly optimistic person. I basically think this is all going in a good direction. And so I just see increasing falsificationism as a fundamentally good thing. We used to talk about this at Quora all the time. It's kind of the only thing. It really, if I could do one thing in my life, I read the beginning of Infinity, like if I could do one thing in my life, it would be accelerate the development of knowledge of all kinds. People I think often think I mean scientific knowledge. And as you know, I actually don't give a shit about them nerds. I include in that like fucking, my buddies and I, we really want to start doing crawfish boils, and we want to also get into fishing, get a little boat, go fishing more often. None of us really know how to do that stuff. And like, there are now tools that are going to make it really easy for us. YouTube, we'll watch some videos, we'll figure it out, we'll do a good crawfish boil. That'll become a regular part of our lives. Our families will gather. It's going to be sick, That is something the internet makes possible that 30 years ago when I was a boy, you had to know a guy. And if you're like me, you're like a weird little dude, you don't always know a guy who knows how to do shit, who's going to teach you how to do crawfish boiling or whatever. So I don't take that shit lightly. I think increasing knowledge access is everything, and in letting a culture develop that can falsify things. You see, half of Substack is great writing about what is not working for some group, and often about the internet, often about phones, how to raise children with all that stuff. You can tell it's a platform for people who are a little countercultural. And the ultimate point of a counterculture, it doesn't have to be a dominant culture. It's to create more cultures. And I think that also flows in very well with our old decentralized thing. It's like, I don't want an internet monoculture. I think it's bad for absolutely everyone. And I think we're obviously part of this new kind of, post 2022, 2023 thing of, you're starting to see platforms really become different. It's so funny. You mentioned carcination. Is that how you say that? Carcination? I mix it up with carcinogen. So I always want to say like carcinogen. But
when things convergently evolve into crabs, there's lots of organisms that look like crabs, even though they share no common ancestor, because the crab form is well adapted to its environment, the same way that Instagram starts to look a lot like TikTok in some ways, in some places.
That's right. And that phenomenon, as that's happening, I think you're also going to see the opposite of that, brand diversification, sorting of networks by norms and affiliations. And but I think what people are going to discover is that homogeneity didn't come from the users who happened to be on Twitter in 2017 or whatever. It came from the model. It comes from what the model rewards. And so I think we have a much better shot. And I think you can already see this, when we launched Notes, a lot of people were like, oh, fuck, here it comes, the Substack monoculture. And yet somehow, even in Notes, you can tell that the pockets are more coherent. There's less internecine combat because we're not constantly taking the hottest shit and throwing it in people's faces who it'll make upset, And so, it's going to be hard for me to poke holes in this, man. I basically agree with this. Maybe the only thing I'd say is this is more about Substack than it is about any challenge to the idea. But in the same way that LLMs can do more just through learning language than you would have predicted, I often think those other platforms, and particularly TikTok, has always scared me. But if those guys get their shit together, they could solve for this within the framework, some of this within the framework that they've got. Now, the thing is, I really do believe that ads makes it all but impossible, but it's not totally impossible. If one of them had some guts, could take some steps, could figure it out, maybe. But that's a Substack unique problem. Broadly, I think that's correct. Yeah.
I think YouTube is pretty well positioned for that, to be honest. And YouTube is to my mind, the best of the big platforms. It's actually got, they have a model for paying people that make things on it. It's not great yet compared to what else is available, but there's a bunch of things. I think of all of the major networks, YouTube is the one that's already got one foot in this world, to my mind. And then I think why does this tie to the AI stuff in my mind is, I think that all of this new tech that is becoming newly possible accelerates kind of both sides of this equation. On the one hand, like I look at TikTok and okay, the relationship you have with people on there is so tenuous, even with the real people, right? I've heard a lot of creators be like, oh, an Instagram person has a meetup and a bunch of people show up. A TikTok person that has millions and millions of views has a meetup and like 3 people show up. Because it's like, you just don't even have a relationship with the person in many cases. I think that's not true in every case.
It's like a truck stop. Honestly, it's like when I'm on TikTok, I haven't used TikTok in a long time, but when I used it a lot, I loved it, as you remember. And it really has this, I think if you've used the comment sections much, the comments are exuberant. People are always having a great time fucking making jokes. Everybody jokes. the vibe is identical to the vibe I feel when I'm at a really nice truck stop and everybody's excited to be out of their car. They finally fucking peed. The truck stop's nicer than they expected. It's a Buc-ee's. Everybody's thrilled. And we all know we're never going to see each other again. So everybody's really excited to get into conversations. You just go, hey, where you headed? You know, people talking all over the place because it's so anonymized. And so I feel like TikTok has this thing of nobody uses their real identity on it, or very few people do. Or even if, actually, let me rephrase, even if you do, it never gets exposed. It's like somehow you don't feel like you're seen on TikTok, which is a really interesting property of that app.
I think I could be wrong, but I'm interested in your take on this as a reformed TikTok user. But I feel like if you replace the videos with really good, funny videos made entirely by AI, it's the same app.
Well, it depends on the video. Okay, so some percentage of TikTok videos are interesting because of the real world event depicted. So, you know, a helicopter crashes into a crane. If that's AI, I'm like, who gives a shit? I do that in video games every day of my life, you know? For some reason, I want to know it's real.
It was a real video of the AI crashing the crane, but it was like an AI that had like framed the shot or something. Would you care?
Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. So no, you are 100% correct. If every one of the accounts were replaced with AI and we're still sharing videos that had interest in themselves to me, that would be fine. And then some percentage of videos could be AI created as well. Some percentage of videos could be like, you know, if they're about, you know, certainly news. I often wonder about this, if people really understand this, that like only one person needs to find out a piece of news. And then if there are efficient software systems, everyone on Earth can find out that piece of news, which means there's not a huge amount of value chain you can build up in the news business in the most fundamental sense. Like news organizations are going to have to become op-ed lifestyle movement leader brands. Like it's like you read the New York Times because you are a New York Times person and everything is just an op-ed because like, I mean, we're, you know, there's no more, right? Am I crazy about this? Like, the AI can write the article in every language. It can write the article for every publication. That's already done, you know? It's only analysis and op-ed now.
Yeah, and I think within the analysis, and especially the opinion, it gets back to this point of like, there is no right way to do that, right? The thing you're getting back to culture. How should we interpret these events? what should we make of this?
There's not going to be
it's like fundamentally a human question. And to the extent that you've got the AI trying to foist upon you, what should you make of this? People fucking hate it. People do not like it. I do not like a lecture when I ask my AI for something that tells me I shouldn't want that thing.
No, people fucking loathe it. I think it's probably one of those hilarious revealed preference things that OpenAI's data about we'll never see. But like, I am so sure it shows up in the data that like, every user who that thing fucking refuses to obey is like 7,000 times less likely to pay. 7 bounces never. Like I go weeks without visiting the OpenAI website after I have a bad experience like that because I'm just like, well, the fucking hell with this. I mean, it makes me crazy, and I think I'm a median insane person for the United States of America. I really do. I think most of these people have reactions like I do. And I bet OpenAI saw that data, and that's why everybody's crawfishing on that. Because it feels like that's all over. I feel like they're pulling all that stuff back. And partly that's competitive pressure, I'm sure. And I'm sure they'll have some. But no, I think that's very real. You know, it's interesting. What it immediately made me think of is like, well, one thing is we used to talk about this. This is ironic, but we used to talk about this at Quora a lot, which was, so one big question investors and people would ask about Quora is, well, what the hell is the point of Quora with Google? Google's, you know, back in the day when people, remember when Google search used to be good and people talked about Google fondly because they thought it was a good company that made good products? Fucking, no, it really wasn't, but it seems like it was another universe now. Fucking,
I used to hate Microsoft.
Back then they'd say, hey,
they were lame and dead, and now I'm like, Microsoft seems to know what's up. What a weird timeline we're in.
No. It's so, oh man, fucking, David was joking this morning that he thinks Sam Altman is about to take the corniest, corny crown away from whoever's got it right now. And that's the fastest loop on that I've ever seen, right? 2 months ago, if somebody had said Sam Altman is taking a spaceship away from Earth, a lot of people in Silicon Valley would have said, I don't need to know anything more. I want to be on the spaceship. And now I feel like tons of people are like, I think poor Sam has lost it, but that's pressure for you. I don't know. Anyway, or maybe he saw something with GPT-5. You know, that's the big joke. Or we used to talk all the time about why do you have to exist given Google? Google's just going to keep getting better and better, more and more one boxes, more and more summary. And Adam and others would often say people really underweigh how important human knowledge is. And not only human knowledge in the sense of, say, advice about how to handle a breakup, but also human knowledge in the sense of how different humans represent fundamental knowledge. There's an explanation of almost every fact that will work for you, and there's an explanation of almost every fact that will not work for you, that will actively thwart your learning of what's involved. And if AI could be good enough at linking all of this, the core thing was AI at the distribution layer at the time. I think now AI writes this shit. You can really see a world where like Substack being a place where it's just a person and their readers. Fundamentally, it's like whatever we're going to build everything on Earth, but fundamentally, it's a person and their readers. It's like that's the core primitive to preserve in the culture that's developing now, and everything can hang on that. We talked about it before. It's like we got the fundamental thing right, and so
to the extent that you bring in AI,
we have a pretty good shot there.
To the extent that you bring in AI, it's not to replace that, and you don't want to. I don't want to live in a world where we're like, no, it's going to be only organic. Never an AI will touch any of these services. But it's like we should use it to amplify that. We should use it to give people creative leverage. We should use it to make it. And this is what Substack did from the start, was say, hey, you're a person who has ideas and something to share. That's enough. You don't need to understand how to set up a website. You don't need to understand how to get your email domain settings right. You don't need to understand how to set up your business to take payments. Like all of these things where we just say, okay, that's the core. We're going to make everything else not be necessary is actually quite a profound thing. And, if we can say you're not going to need to figure out how to edit your podcast, you're not going to need to figure out how to set this, like if you are ready to do that thing, if you have something to share with other people and other people are interested in following you for it, we're going to make every other piece of that work magically. It's going to be a tremendous accelerant to this whole thing. I think we're getting into a world where like you're going to, you'll be able to sit down and write a feature film and make the whole thing yourself very quickly. And the next format, and who knows what that thing is. So from the like, what is AI how's it gonna replace people seems boring to me from a Substack perspective. I don't think there's any interesting stuff there, but how is it gonna amplify people feels like a deep, deep well in this world. If we have the business model right, if we have the relations right, we can keep applying the same principle of like, we're just going to keep giving more and more power and agency and leverage to people and use technology to serve that end, their end, the end they're deciding, not our end, not our view of what they should read or what they should see. But we're going to actually put the model, the technology, everything in service of the people using it. I think that's the thing I'm excited to work on.
Here's a hackathon idea. I bet we could get Ben to jump at this. Make it possible either for the readers or the writers, anybody, either side, to bundle a set of people, train an LLM to reflect their worldview, values, wisdom as instantiated in their writing, and then their readers can access it in the Substack app. And that way you can build LLMs that like actually are always derived from the writers you respect most. I bet Ben would build that. There is a real thing in that, though. The thing that excites me the most about AI is just, going back, you mentioned, we were talking earlier about what it unlocks. I think people almost always underweigh marginal changes or changes in friction, changes in things that like apply to everything, but not to any great extent to all things. And this is an idea that I'm certain I only understand because of David Cole. But, he used to talk a lot about the interstate system. And if you're a designer, you should look at the interstate system as one of the greatest achievements of your field. And most designers, I think, are probably like, cars are bad and the interstate doesn't look cool. And like what the interstate made possible was for hundreds of millions of people to go places they never could have gone, afford things they never could have afforded, get jobs that would have never existed. Like the interstate is as big a deal for the poor in America as almost anything else that's been done. It's really changed the world. I grew up in a world where we would go to Florida because there was an interstate. State highways weren't so good. That shook your car more. Like there's all these little things, right? Cars have gotten better. The roads have gotten better. Nobody ever gives a shit about what all this unlocks, but it unlocks everything, And I think AI is in this category where it's like, just take a small example. Already Substack is so much simpler than what existed before, but it's already way too complex. Like, you and I talk about this all the time. Ideally, like you say, anyone with an idea could go to substack.com and there's like a button that says like start and they do it. And then they do whatever they can do. I don't know what it is. They sing, they write, they And then we do whatever needs to be done with that to get to people who might be interested in it. And then those people pay for it. And then they've got a loop, that's the vision. And AI, for years I've been like, it's like I think about the interface and I go, Jesus Christ, I don't know how we're going to make this fucking subscriber table simple. I don't know how we're going to make these options simple, the settings page. And AI actually starts to make it somewhat imaginable how these things could be broken down in different ways, interface ways and interactive conversational ways. So, no, I'm keen about all that stuff. And so it's so funny in public. I'm basically always like being a bear about it, but that's just because I'm standing up for the crypto dualist point of view that humans are incredibly special and that you should think about what humans are and can do as the most special thing that any of us know has ever heard of in the entire history of the universe. And I feel like there's a little thing where LLMs are part of that whole scene of, no, humans are dumb, messy monkeys, wetware for shitty algorithms that we can code ourselves. And I hate that. And so I push back really hard on that interpretation of LLMs. But I completely agree with everything else about it,
Awesome. All right. I have a round of Mills trivia to end. Now that people have heard all the blathering,
Okay.
what they really came for is they want to know some things about Mills.
Yeah, I accidentally answered a bunch of these in notes this morning too, by the way. I didn't realize that that's what it was for. And so I was like, oh, I'll answer this.
I've only taken one from there, I think. All right. What's the weather like in New Orleans right now?
Hot and sunny and humid. It is. It's been really humid lately, like dramatically so, to where even natives are like, "Wow, this is pretty humid." I love it. It's an awkward thing in my marriage now, truly, Chris, because this is the climate I grew up in, and so I love it. I'm like, I'm a couple miles from where I grew up, and I'm like, it feels good, And every day Abby's like sweating and dying, and it is so fucking hot and wet and disgusting, and there's bugs everywhere. But weather's hot.
Awesome. All right. Maybe you answered this, but I was going to ask, what are designers right about? I love that you spend a lot of time as a traitor to your field, griping about all the things that design gets wrong and breaks.
What a great question.
What are designers right about? Maybe besides the interstate system, which we covered.
Yeah, okay. I think designers are largely correct that users respond sentimentally positively to investments in experience and aesthetics. I think sometimes designers are right that sentimental delta in experience is significant for the product. I think often designers are wrong about whether it's significant for the product. But sometimes they're correct. There are whole categories of product and experience that you wouldn't begin to entertain if you're going through it, the sensations of it, the aesthetic perception of it weren't up to some standard. If you went to an extremely nice restaurant and it didn't conform with your expectations, everybody dislikes that, I think. And so I think designers are often correct in their reaction. And maybe it sounds like I'm saying they're always wrong because their frame is often wrong, or they're often wrong because their frame is often wrong. And maybe that is what I'm saying. I basically think the design field has been, how do I put this? The design field has not taken seriously the possibility that it doesn't need to exist. And I think this is crazy, actually, just to bring it back in a pro design direction. Johnny Ive once wrote a poem, Chris, and they put it on Apple's website. I think it was supposed to be part of a big marketing thing, and I think it sort of flopped. And I think it might be when Apple kind of realized that they didn't need to keep with this design marketing shit. They were big enough and the quality was high enough. They didn't have to talk about it anymore. The poem said something to the effect of, and I think he said this in a couple of contexts, the first thing we ask is, does it have a right to exist? And I love this. I think this is such a cool, mystical, completely incompatible with business, but very mystical standard, which is like, before you make something, think about the clutter. Actually, when you were talking about your all hands comments earlier, I was going to mention this wonderful Vannevar Bush quote from the 40s, where he talks about the amount of information we have is exploding and what we lack is a way of getting through it. And I once wrote an essay arguing that machine learning was that thing. Machine learning is the thing that lets us navigate the maze. And but it's so funny. Computer scientists have been on this for a minute. People should be concerned about adding to the fucking noise. This world is glutted with things that don't need to exist, statements that didn't need to be uttered. I love the idea of getting a little more austere about whether things have a right to exist. Part of that is when you do something like what Nick is doing. We've got Nick doing some design work right now. And when Nick looks at it, what he's thinking is, does this provide enough sentiment that it has a right to exist? Will people go through this? People like me, critical people, and they'll go, this is real, this is good, they put effort into it. And I think designers are right to think and care about all of that. What I argued in that piece Designer Duds wasn't that even they should stop. it was that designers should be open about the fact that they need a counterbalancing force. And at Apple, that was Steve Jobs, who was not a designer and was constantly pushing designers around and being a huge fucking maniac. Often, he did a thing that I think you can definitely identify with. There's a famous story about iMovie, where Steve Jobs kept saying to the designers, okay, here's what I want. You take a movie and you drag it into a window, and then that's the movie. And they'd be like, what the fuck? So they'd go back and try to dupe Avid or whatever, and they'd come back and he'd say, this is all good. I like this is all good, but it sucks and we're not shipping it because I want to be able to take a thing and drag it in. Well, so here's the crazy thing, man. I was a user when this was happening. I remember when iMovie came out, and what came into my head as a user was, holy fucking shit, you can just drag a movie file into that window? That's fucking incredible. And when I got iMovie, that's what I did. Jobs was right. The designers were wrong. The designers wanted to do something more thoughtful and intelligent and innovative. And Jobs had the right, simple idea. And so this somehow I'm talking shit about designers again. I really don't mean to. I do think it's a thing where they care about the right things. They just need counterbalancing forces.
Daily the Comedy Muse asks, what is an Urcatronus? And where is Oblalia?
This came from one of my favorite notes of all time. I don't know. I don't know if either of those is a real word. I don't think Oblalia is. I looked it up once. I was hopeful that it was something really crazy, but that's from one of my favorite notes of all time. So some users were complaining about how fucking terrible search on our platform is. And one of them was like, God damn, I can't search on this product. I loved it. Well, just because, search is bad, and I was like, God damn, I was right there with him, and I was like, God damn, they're right. One of them said something like, I can never fucking find anything on this platform. I read the best shit in the world, and then I can never fucking find it. And then somebody replied, oh yeah, and it's fucking horrible because it's always written by somebody with a name like Architronus of Oblalia, which you can never remember, And I just thought what I loved about it was, first off, that's true. That's like every goddamn pub name on Substack is some insane fucking thing, which I love. I'm a long tail internet guy, so this is my heaven. And it was just such a perfect, it was one of those jokes where the fake example was so good. Like I for a second I thought, wait, is that a real pub? Have I read the Architronus of Oblalia? So I made it my name because I just thought it was so good.
It's like a hallucination from an LLM. Better than reality could have been.
Better than the real thing.
You're a crypto dualist? Do you believe in God now? And when did that start?
Yeah, I believe in God, and I think I've kind of always believed in God. I've played my cards close to my chest. I was probably what you would call like I was a very skeptical agnostic, bordering on atheist. I now have like discomfort with the term atheist, not for religious reasons, but for definitional reasons. But basically, I would have represented myself as an atheist probably for about 10 years or 15 years, around the time when I got into physics, and then before the time I got into epistemology. So basically, the window for me of confident atheism was from physics to epistemology, and then the guy, as you know, Chris, the guy who got me into epistemology is a physicist. And so as I got sort of deeper into that world, a lot of things I had felt and believed when I was young seemed accessible again, or seemed plausible again. And then also, at the same time, I was getting much more serious about ancient philosophy. And as you know, one of the big kind of moments for me was realizing that there still isn't an answer to the cosmological argument. And actually, this relates to something Deutsch talks about. The way out of the cosmological argument for most confident atheists is, well, we simply can't know. And so don't invent shit. Like, you just don't know, man. And one of the things that amused me about reading Substack super user David Bentley Hart, and that I really loved about it, that I also got from David Deutsch was, and this relates to what I was just saying about LLMs, is that no, God damn it, we can understand everything. We can literally understand everything. And if we can't understand something, it's supernatural, fundamentally. And something I talk to a friend of mine about this a lot. I'll sometimes challenge him. I'll say, can you describe us encountering something we don't understand? Just describe what happens. And in trying to describe it, one of the inevitable problems you have is that it's in the world. So it must in some way be entangled with the physics of our world, which means that we will learn about how it is entangled and its nature from that entanglement, unless it doesn't obey the laws of physics, in which case it's just a supernatural thing. And so it's not different than talking about any other supernatural thing. I'm super down to do that. I love doing that shit. I'm a mystic, But I can't pretend that there's a hard limit to human understanding anymore. And I think I was always really frustrated by that argument because, of course, in a maybe a more childish way, it's self-sabotaging. If you believe that human understanding isn't sufficient to understand everything, then probably human understanding isn't sufficient to understand that. Like, I trust reason, I trust logic, I trust epistemology, and all of that kind of led me to be a confident theist. Sophia was asking me recently, I'm a highly confident deist or theist. Everything underneath that, I would have to put very low confidence on.
So you're a
but
theist
I'm
and a
confident about
mystic,
that.
but those are separate for you.
Totally separate. And I have like any of the mystical stuff I'm into, the books I would, I probably, if a gun were to my head, I'd have to say I couldn't ever have more than 60 or 80% confidence of anything, in life.
Let me see if I'm understanding or connecting a thread that I maybe see here. One of the things I took from the beginning of Infinity, which I thought was quite profound, was the idea that you can judge the quality of an explanation outside of its pure falsifiability in reality, right? So this is his argument for the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics, saying, hey, we have a set of observable facts that could be explained multiple ways, and it is still perfectly valid to have a preference between those explanations for reasons that we judge the explanations. Like we can think that a many worlds interpretation is just a better, more congruent explanation than a Copenhagen interpretation where things are kind of fundamentally random, even though they have the exact same predicted outputs. It's not like you would predict something different. Right. Do you feel the same way between your theism and your former atheism, or is that a different thing entirely?
No, I think that's a very fair way of putting it. I think I'm probably at a stage, and I go all over the place with this stuff, but I'm probably at a stage right now where I think, honestly, not to be too Eastern about this, I think this. I was very into Buddhism as well, and I studied Buddhism quite a bit. I basically studied Buddhism and Christianity most of all in college, and I don't want to be too Eastern about it, but I'm not sure any of the words actually matter that much. I think honestly, if I could recover one thing from the theistic age, it would be a confident, optimistic human orientation towards the reality of the transcendentals that we pursue. And what I would like to destroy about the atheistic age is a neurotic insecurity about the value and meaning of human transcendentals. And what I lament about the decline of religion is no particular configuration of the institutions themselves. It's really that I feel there was a time when every boy and girl in America didn't have to reconstruct all of the justification for caring about love and justice and peace and beauty and truth from fucking scratch, which I basically feel I had to do. And I think it's set me back decades, and I don't regret anything about it. The journey's the journey. And some people never even start the journey, but I think a lot of people out there really do feel, and even they might not have the words for it, but they feel truly nihilistic. None of it matters. It's all fake. And there's a lot that flows into that. I'm not blaming anybody in particular. I think one of the things that you see a lot in the culture wars, people will blame academics for this. And for example, I remember encountering, when it first started to pepper into my life, the phrase social construct or construct. Construct as a term that invalidates the meaning of whatever is being asserted because it's just an arbitrary human invention. Well, they're all arbitrary human inventions. Okay, let's get real. And I always felt like both more radical and more traditional than these people. But the truth is, the nihilism didn't come from college campuses. They didn't help. They didn't fight the nihilism, but the nihilism's in us. You've heard me make this argument many times. Whenever culture war stuff comes up, I think people need to learn more American history because it's all been exactly the same for 300 years, and it all comes out of the same place.
Oh yeah. For the non-Louisianans, who is James Carville, and what was it like meeting him?
Oh, it's dope. James Carville. Okay, so James Carville is a political strategist and operative. I posted that I met him in notes, and one of the guys. And some notes user came in and was like, man, fuck him, dumb, vile human being, maybe the most despicable human being who's ever lived. He evil, part of destroying America, And look, candidly, that may all be true. I wouldn't know, and I don't care. The thing is, so here's what James Carville is to me, okay? When I was a young man, there was this presidential candidate, Bill Clinton, and he was from the South, and we were all kind of chuffed about that. We thought, wow, goddamn, he's a fucking total Southern dipshit, and he's like up there playing saxophone on the Arsenio Hall show. Well, no, we don't care. That's the thing is, you can't embarrass us. This is when Clinton was in office. I used to try to tell people about Huey Long, or Edwin Edwards. And we had a governor, man, who was in office 3 terms. Then he served federal prison time for fraud. And then he ran again, and he won. He won the 4th time. And then he went back to jail afterward. And on one of his campaign quotes, he said, man, I'd have to be caught in bed with a dead girl or a live boy to lose this election. And he still won the election. Like, we don't care. Once they like you down here, they like you, and people always like Edwin Edwards. They always like Bill Clinton. They always like James Carville, independent of all that stuff. Now, so what I learned about Carville was, it's in the 90s, I'm a teenager. This guy starts showing up on cable TV. And then I get a Hunter S. Thompson book, not a very good one, called Better Than Sex. And it's all about the Clinton campaign. Hunter, hung out with them and got wasted a lot, I guess, and sent them a lot of faxes. And so Carville's a character in this book. And so I'm like, my God, one of the political guys made it out. He's famous. He's hanging out with this guy who's president, and he was such a weirdo. And I loved his accent. I just kind of loved how raw he was. He was a local boy made good out there, but he stayed a local guy. And so we all just kind of liked him. I completely concede the possibility he's the most evil human being who's ever lived. He has a nice house. I went into his penthouse. He's got a penthouse apartment down here in the French Quarter. And it's full of art. It was awesome. Mary Madeline came out, but I was starstruck and confused. I didn't recognize her in time, so I did not greet her properly. And I've had several cycles of panic and regret over basically feeling like I was fucking rude to Mary Madeline, like an idiot. But he's great, very chill, very fun. We talked a lot about LSU. Yeah, he's exactly how he seems on TV. Is maybe the quickest way I can answer that question. If you've ever seen a clip of James Carville, he's exactly like he seemed on TV. In fact, Chris, I don't know if you remember his 30 Rock cameo. He's exactly like he was on 30 Rock.
That's awesome.
Truly.
All right, my last question is not a Mills trivia. What should this podcast be called? What do we call him this time?
Oh, shit. Okay, so what? I think I know a little bit about what you're into intellectually. The authors, the figures you like. You played video games for a while. David and I talked a lot about using video game concepts or names because they're fun, You were a StarCraft guy?
Played a bit of StarCraft back in the day. I got into Dota for a while. Defense of the Ancients. That might be a rich territory. But
pretty good. It's kind of good. Dota. We probably want to stay away from Substack related names. Because we've mined all that. You know what I mean? We've already done those exercises. It's hard not to use your last name. It's you have a kind of an iconoclast name. But what could you use? Best in show. Oh shit! Wait, mess with the best. Mess with the best is good. Mess with the best is good.
It's also from the movie Hackers, which was a formative movie.
Yeah. There you go. Mess with the best. You don't even have to say die like the rest. Everybody knows where that goes,
Everybody knows exactly where that is. This podcast
that's actually pretty good.
And burn. This is why I asked you.
But that's... What else? I'm trying to think of all the best Western. Best Western's kind of funny.
All the best.
Simply the best.
Slack emoji.
Oh God, that's one of my favorite Slack emojis. All the best. I often am tempted to use that. And don't. That's probably my number one tempted to put all the emoji that I don't actually go through it.
Well, this has been a blast, man. Thank you
this is super fun.
Putting up with my awkward podcast hosting. This was even if we just throw this in the garbage, I would have this competition again. This was sick. Where can people find you?
Yeah, this is totally fun.
What's your Substack, Mills?
Oh, my Substack is suckstosuck.substack.com. We just recently discovered that it should have been named something else, and we're all very brokenhearted about it. We all wish we'd named it Rats from Rocks. We should have named it Rats from Rocks instead.
I was thinking about asking that. What the hell is Rats from Rocks?
This guy, I found this crazy fucking Substack that is it was literally, I have spent nights looking through the bookstore just being look, I want hardcore, but weird arguments about God. That's what I want. I want hardcore, weird, rigorous arguments about God. And this guy, this is what a Substack is. It's called Worldview Design. Okay, I think it's called Let me see. Let me make sure. Because any traffic should go to the same. Yeah, Worldview Design. Okay, which is already a fantastic name for a blog. Okay, and every one of these posts, right, is Just exactly what I was looking for. From infinite chains to a foundational reality. How to make a mind. The embodied mind arguments. The God inside. A new argument for a finite past. Are skeptics of physicalism motivated by religion? This is all, like, because of this guy, I got to read Gödel's ontological argument, which I had not heard of and which is completely insane and really fun. But anyway, he has a post somewhere where he's talking about, the problem of what I think for many years they've buried in the term emergence. You'll just hear that people say, oh, well, fucking it emerges. It's emergence, And he's talking about this issue of like mind coming from matter. And he just offhandedly analogizes it. He says something like, look, man, he's talking about a deductive thing. It's very formal. He's got a bunch of formal stuff in there. And he's like, look, if you saw a bunch of rats coming out of rocks, that doesn't tell you how they came out of the rocks. And I was like, oh my God. Rats from rocks? I don't know why, but it hit me like a fucking bus. I was like, this is my favorite description of what's happening on planet Earth that I've ever heard of. Like, if an alien swung by and said, hey, what's going on here? I'd be like, well, get a load of this. It was just rocks forever. And now shit's crawling out of the rocks. That's us. We're the rats from the rocks, And I just love the name. It sounds like a punk band. It sounds cool. And it's so close to Sucks to Suck that it's like, I feel like basically, I almost wish we could call it Rats from Rocks.
All right. Well, there you have it. suckstosuck.substack.com. I am at cb.substack.com. Mills Baker, thank you. This was fun.
Thanks, man.
Throw your hands up if you with it. Drop it.